Snow drifted across the cemetery like torn pieces of a forgotten letter, settling on the fresh mound of earth that held Harper Ellison's mother. She stood there in a black wool coat that didn't quite fit around her 6-month pregnancy, one hand on her belly as if shielding the baby from the cold, or from the truth she sensed was coming. The wind stung her eyes, but it wasn't the wind that made them blur. It was grief, raw, suffocating, endless. Behind her, footsteps crunched on the gravel. She didn't turn. She knew the rhythm too well. Grant, her husband, or the man she thought was still her husband. "Harper," he said, voice too calm for a graveside, "we need to talk." She closed her eyes. Not here. Not today. Not while dirt was still falling in her imagination over her mother's coffin. "Grant, please, not now." But he was already pulling something from the inside pocket of his charcoal coat, a thick envelope, weighted, official. The kind of envelope that didn't hold sympathy cards. "I can't do this anymore," he said, his breath forming tiny clouds in the frozen air. "The marriage, the baby, any of it." The world around her fell silent. Even the wind seemed to pause, listening for her reaction. Harper finally looked up, and the first thing she saw was the gold Mont Blanc pen in his hand, one she'd given him on their anniversary. Now he held it like a blade. "I'm filing for divorce," he said, placing the envelope on the steel folding table the funeral staff had forgotten to clear away. Its surface was cold enough to send a thin fog under the paper. "I've already signed. You just need to review it." Her heart didn't just crack. It folded in on itself. "You're divorcing me? Here?" Her voice was barely a breath. "At my mother's burial?" Grant slipped his hands into his pockets like a man waiting for an Uber. "It's cleaner this way. You'll adjust faster." Then, as if delivering a final blow, he added, "And I'm not raising a child that might not even be mine." The wind roared back, furious for her. Harper felt her knees weaken. The cemetery blurred, headstones tilting, snow swirling, her mother's name dissolving in her vision. She gripped the side of the table to keep from collapsing. "You think so little of me?" she whispered. Grant didn't answer. He was already walking away, his polished shoes leaving perfect impressions in the snow, cold, sharp, final. Harper stared at the envelope. Her breath hitched. Her baby shifted beneath her palm as if sensing danger. And that's when the whisper of destiny, quiet but unmistakable, seemed to curl around her like warmth. He has no idea what's coming. Because in less than 24 hours, Harper would learn a truth powerful enough to shatter his world, a truth worth $500 million, a truth her mother died protecting. Harper Ellison had never asked the world for much. A quiet home, a kind partner, a future where she could raise a child in peace. That had always been enough. For years, she truly believed she had it. Back in their small Brooklyn apartment above the old bookstore, life seemed simple, even sweet. The smell of old pages drifting through the vent, Grant coming home late with takeout, their tiny kitchen table where they used to plan weekend trips they never took. She held on to those memories like fragile glass, afraid that looking too closely would reveal the cracks she'd missed. But now, standing alone in that same apartment only hours after the burial, she saw everything differently. Grant's shoes weren't by the door. His coat wasn't on the hanger. Even the scent of his cologne, sharp, metallic, too expensive for their budget, was fading from the air. It struck her that he'd been disappearing long before he walked away at the cemetery. Harper sat on the couch, the springs creaking beneath her. She pulled one of Grant's old sweaters against her chest, trying to inhale comfort that no longer lived there. Her baby gave a small kick, gentle but insistent, as if reminding her she wasn't alone. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I really thought we were safe." Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. A message from Fiona. "I heard what happened. Please tell me you're okay. I'm coming over. Harper typed back, Don't. I just need a little time. She didn't want anyone to see her like this. Broken, abandoned, humiliated. Her eyes drifted toward Grant's old MacBook sitting open on the dining table. He'd left in such a hurry he hadn't even closed the lid. A document glowed on the screen. A mortgage calculator. Then another tab. Luxury apartments in Midtown. And another, restaurant reservations for 2 at Le Jardin Rouge, the kind of place that served gold leaf desserts and charged more than she made in a week. A reservation dated last month. 2 seats, not her name. Her heart tightened, but she forced herself to breathe. The truth, no matter how cruel, was better than the illusion she'd been surviving on. She reached for the laptop to close it. She didn't want to know more, but her hand froze. A notification popped up in the corner of the screen. A message preview. From someone named Sienna. Did you give her the papers? Call me after. We're celebrating tonight. Celebrating. The room spun. The radiator hissed loudly in the silence, emphasizing the brutal truth. Grant hadn't fallen out of love. He'd moved on long before today, and he'd chosen the exact moment of her deepest grief to sever the last thread between them. Harper pressed her palms to her eyes, swallowing a sob. She felt as if her entire life, every promise, every plan, every tender lie, had been ripped from her hands in one merciless day. But underneath the heartbreak was something else. Quiet, small, growing. Not anger, not vengeance. Resolve. If Grant thought he'd walked away from a powerless woman, he had chosen the worst day imaginable to underestimate her, because tomorrow, everything would change. The next morning, Harper woke to a heaviness in her chest that felt almost physical, like grief had settled into her ribs overnight. Her body ached from crying, and the apartment was unbearably silent. Her mother's scarf still hung over the armchair, soft blue wool, faintly smelling of lavender, one of the few items she'd kept from the hospice room. Harper touched it gently, letting the fabric slip between her fingers. That was when she noticed something had fallen to the floor beneath the scarf, a small leather-bound notebook. Her mother's handwriting embossed on the first page. For Harper, when the time is right. Her breath caught. She sat on the couch and opened it carefully. The pages were filled with looping cursive, little notes, memories, reminders. But near the back were words that didn't feel sentimental. They felt intentional. Douglas will explain everything. Trust him. And trust yourself, my love. Douglas. Her mother's old attorney. A kind man with silver glasses and a voice that always sounded like it was halfway through telling a bedtime story. Harper stared at the name, confusion washing over her. What could a lawyer possibly have to explain? Her phone buzzed. A voicemail from Douglas Avery himself. Harper, I'm deeply sorry for your loss. Your mother left instructions for me to meet with you privately as soon as possible. It's important. Please come to my office on Park Avenue today. Harper felt her heartbeat skip. Important. The word carried weight she didn't understand, but the notebook in her lap suddenly felt heavier. She dressed in the only maternity dress clean enough that wasn't wrinkled beyond repair, pulled her hair into a low bun, and called a rideshare. As the car moved through Manhattan, she watched the skyline flicker past, the sun glinting off glass towers, the rush of people climbing subway stairs, the muffled hum of a city that didn't pause for anyone's heartbreak. Douglas's office was polished marble and warm lighting, the kind of place where the silence felt controlled, not empty. A receptionist guided her to a private conference room where Douglas rose from his seat the moment she entered. Harper, he said gently, placing a hand over his heart. Your mother loved you more than life itself. Tears stung the back of her eyes again. She left me a notebook. It said you'd explain something. Douglas exhaled, then opened a thick folder resting on the table. Your mother lived quietly, but not because she was ordinary. She co-founded a medical technology company 25 years ago, Mercer Health Group. The name hit Harper like cold water. Mercer? As in the billion-dollar corporation? Douglas nodded. Your mother owned a substantial share. She sold some over the years but kept a large portion in trust, for you. Harper shook her head. But she lived so simply. She protected you, Douglas said, from greedy hands, from opportunists, from people who would see only money and not you. Harper swallowed hard. How much did she leave? Douglas slid a document toward her. Her eyes scanned the number. Her breath stopped. $500,000. $500 million. Her hands trembled. And then Douglas added the part that made her world tilt all over again. Harper, you are now one of the largest voting shareholders of Mercer Health Group. Julian Mercer will want to meet you immediately. The conference room dissolved from Harper's mind the second she stepped outside. The snow had stopped, leaving the sidewalks wet and shining like mirrors that reflected a world she no longer recognized. $500 million, votes, shares, power. None of it felt real. None of it felt like hers. She wrapped her arms around herself as she walked, her mind drifting back, pulled not by logic but by memory. Back to the hospital. Back to the soft beeping of machines and the faint lavender lotion her mother always wore. Back to the last real conversation they'd ever have. It had been 3 nights before her mother passed. Harper had been half asleep in the visitor's recliner when her mother whispered her name. Harper. Sweetheart. She jolted upright. Mom, do you need water? The nurse? But her mother only smiled the way she always did when she wanted attention, that gentle tug at the corner of her lips. Sit with me. Harper pulled her chair close and took her mother's thin hand, tracing the veins beneath translucent skin. I'm here. For a moment, they said nothing. Her mother studied her, really studied her, eyes warm but weighted with something heavy, something she didn't yet understand. You have always been braver than you think, she whispered, and stronger than the men who will try to shrink you. Harper frowned. Mom, no one is trying to shrink me. Her mother laughed softly as if she knew the future and pitied her daughter for not seeing it. One day, the world will demand that you choose between who you think you are and who you truly are meant to be. Harper had shaken her head. Mom, I'm not meant to be anything big. I just want a family, a simple life. A shadow crossed her mother's face. Not disappointment, more like sorrow. You're allowed to want softness, Harper, but don't ever mistake softness for weakness. Harper didn't understand. Not then. Her mother squeezed her hand with surprising strength, her eyes suddenly fierce. If there comes a time when someone tries to make you smaller, when someone makes you doubt your worth, promise me you'll walk away. Harper blinked back tears. Why are you saying this? Grant and I are fine. Her mother didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked toward the window, the Manhattan skyline glowing like a constellation of sharp stars. Some storms don't come to destroy, she murmured, but to reveal what was hidden. Harper leaned forward, brushing hair from her mother's forehead. Mom, whatever storm comes, I can handle it, as long as I still have you. Her mother closed her eyes, a sad smile on her lips. My love, one day, you'll realize I've given you more than my presence. I've given you your future. Those were some of the last words they ever shared. Now, standing on Park Avenue with traffic buzzing around her, Harper finally understood. Her mother hadn't been speaking in riddles. She'd been preparing her. And the storm had already begun. Harper had never stepped into a building as tall or as intimidating as the Mercer Health Group tower on Park Avenue. The entrance alone, Marble floors, chrome railings, a ceiling that looked like it touched the clouds, made her feel like she was walking into a world built for people who belonged somewhere higher than she ever dreamed. She pressed a hand to her belly as if her child might steady her nerves. "We just get through today," she whispered. "1 hour at a time." The receptionist guided her to a private elevator, the kind that required a security card and silently soared upward without a single jolt. When the doors opened on the 52nd floor, Harper found herself standing before a glass wall overlooking Manhattan. The skyline stretched endlessly, steel and light merging into a breathtaking view that made her feel both insignificant and strangely anchored. Douglas Avery stood waiting for her in a corner office. But he wasn't alone. A tall man in a tailored charcoal suit, sharp jaw, dark hair slightly tousled, expression unreadable, turned toward her the moment she entered. His presence filled the room instantly, not loud or forceful, just commanding. "Harper," Douglas said with a warm nod, "this is Julian Mercer." Her breath stalled. Mercer, as in the CEO, as in the man whose last name was attached to the billion-dollar company her mother had secretly built a chunk of. Julian stepped forward, extending a hand. "I'm very sorry for your loss. Margaret was remarkable." Harper shook his hand. His grip was firm, yet gentle. "Thank you. I still don't understand why I'm here." Douglas gestured for her to sit. "Because your mother planned it this way. She wanted Julian to meet you immediately after her passing." Julian sat across from her, studying her the way surgeons might study a delicate case. Not unkindly, just intensely. "Your mother wasn't simply a shareholder," he said. "She was the reason this company ever survived its first decade. She funded research that no one else believed in. She became family, in a way." Harper blinked, stunned. "She never told me that." "She preferred to protect you," Julian replied. "The board didn't know she had a daughter until last year. She kept your name out of corporate documents in case anyone tried to take advantage of her." A sickening realization hit Harper like cold water. Grant could have used her if he had known. He could have drained her, manipulated her, controlled her. Her mother's secrecy hadn't been distance, it had been love. Julian slid a folder toward her. "Your mother's shares now make you the third largest voting member of this company. With that comes responsibility, attention, and unfortunately, risk." "Risk," Harper whispered. Douglas cleared his throat. "People will want things from you. Influence, access, even family matters may become complicated." Harper felt the room tilt. "Grant doesn't know any of this." Julian leaned forward, voice quiet but firm. "Then, Harper, you must understand something." She lifted her eyes to meet his. "From this moment on," Julian said, "your life is no longer ordinary, and the people who hurt you yesterday will soon regret it." A shiver ran through her, not of fear, but of awakening. Harper left the Mercer Tower feeling like she had stepped off a cliff into a world made of glass and knives, beautiful but dangerous. The air outside was sharp, the kind that seeped into your bones and reminded you that you were still alive, whether you wanted to be or not. She wrapped her coat tighter around her stomach, whispering to the baby, "We're okay. I promise we're okay." But promises were fragile things, and the world wasn't done testing her. That evening, as she tried to steady herself with chamomile tea in her tiny kitchen, her phone vibrated across the counter. A number she didn't recognize flashed on the screen. She almost ignored it until she saw the message preview. "You don't deserve what she left you." Harper froze. Another buzz. "People like you don't belong in boardrooms. You'll lose everything." Her hands shook. She stared at the words, feeling the floor tilt beneath her. Who would say this? Who even knew about the inheritance? A third message came, colder than the others. You shouldn't have survived this long. Her breath hitched. She backed away from the phone as if it were a weapon. She grabbed her coat, panic rising in her throat. She needed air, space, something that wasn't four walls closing in. She stepped outside into the dim hallway of her building, gripping the railing as she descended the stairs. The sound of her boots echoed too loudly. Every shadow felt wrong. Every flicker of the stairwell light made her heart jump. By the time she reached the sidewalk, her breathing was sharp and uneven. Cars whooshed by, headlights reflecting off puddles. She pressed a hand to her belly, willing her racing pulse to slow. Her phone buzzed again. She turned it over with trembling fingers. A single sentence. Grant should have taken everything before you ruined him. The world narrowed into a pinpoint. Someone knew. Someone was watching her. Her vision blurred. A sudden sharp pain twisted across her abdomen. She gasped. Doubling over, the baby kicked, frantic, panicked. No, no, not now. The pain intensified. Her breath came in shallow bursts. She stumbled toward the curb, trying to flag down a cab, waving with the desperation of someone clinging to the last thread of hope. A yellow taxi screeched to a stop. The driver jumped out to help as she collapsed into his arms. "Hospital," she managed to whisper. "Please, hurry." As the taxi sped through Manhattan, sirens somewhere in the distance, Harper clutched her stomach and fought the rising terror. Not just for herself, not just for the life inside her, but for a truth she could no longer deny. Someone wanted her to fail. Someone wanted her gone. And whoever it was, they already knew far too much. Harper stared out the window at the blur of city lights as pain knifed through her again. This wasn't just heartbreak anymore. This was war. The emergency room smelled faintly of antiseptic and fear. Harper lay on the hospital bed, still trembling, one hand gripping the rail as if it were the only thing holding her to the earth. A monitor beeped steadily beside her, tracking the tiny heartbeat she feared she might lose. A nurse adjusted the IV and spoke softly. "The baby's stable for now. You need to rest." Rest. As if rest were possible when your life was unraveling thread by thread. Just as the nurse turned to leave, Harper's phone vibrated on the tray beside her. The screen lit up with a notification. Another unknown number. Her stomach twisted. She reached for it with hesitant fingers, bracing herself for another attack. But this time, it wasn't a threat. It was a screenshot. A screenshot of Grant standing outside a restaurant in Midtown, kissing a woman. Not Sienna, the name she'd seen on his laptop. This was someone else entirely. The message that followed made her skin crawl. "He's not the only one watching you." Her breath caught. She felt cold all over. "Why are they doing this?" she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Before she could panic further, the curtain to her room swept open. Douglas Avery stepped inside, his face lined with worry. Behind him, unexpectedly, was Julian Mercer, still in his tailored suit but with an expression she had never seen on him, genuine concern. "Harper." Julian's voice softened as he approached. "Douglas told me you were hospitalized. Are you all right?" She swallowed hard. "Someone's threatening me." "Someone knows everything, even about Grant." Douglas exchanged a grim look with Julian. "We came because we found something you need to see." Julian pulled a chair closer to her bed. "The threats aren't random, not anymore. Douglas uncovered emails from an internal account, sent to a burner phone." "Emails?" Harper asked. Julian nodded. "From Chloe Marston." Harper felt a jolt. She'd only heard the name once, from a board roster Douglas mentioned briefly. A high-ranking shareholder, ambitious, powerful. "She's been trying to get control of your mother's shares for years," Douglas explained. "Your mother refusing to sell made Chloe furious. Now that the shares are yours, she sees you as her last obstacle." Harper felt her pulse rise. So she threatened me? She scared me into a hospital bed? Julian's jaw tightened. It gets worse. Douglas opened a folder. Inside were printed screenshots, messages from a burner account to Grant, messages discussing Harper, messages discussing her pregnancy, messages discussing her mother's death. Harper's heart thudded painfully. Grant was working with her? Douglas exhaled heavily. Working for her. She promised him financial backing and connections if he handled the situation with you. Handled. The word felt like poison in her veins. Julian leaned closer, his voice low. Harper, you need to understand. Chloe isn't just after money. She wants control, and she underestimated you because she thinks you're fragile. Harper looked from Julian to Douglas, her fear slowly kindling into something sharper, something alive. She's wrong, Harper whispered. Julian's eyes locked onto hers, steady, unwavering. Yes, he said, she is. And for the first time, Harper realized she wasn't the one who should be afraid. Not anymore. Harper was discharged from the hospital the next afternoon with strict instructions to rest, avoid stress, and come back immediately if the pains returned. She nodded obediently, but deep inside, something had shifted. Fear hadn't left her, but fear was no longer steering the wheel. As Julian's car eased up to the curb, sleek and black against the winter-gray sidewalk, she felt a strange sense of resolve settle inside her like a second heartbeat. Julian opened the door for her. Careful, he murmured, offering his hand. His voice wasn't stern like a CEO now. It was gentle, almost warm. A contrast so sharp it made her chest ache. I'm okay, Harper whispered, although they both knew she wasn't. At least, not yet. Douglas slid into the car behind her. We need to move quickly, he said. Chloe's preparing a board maneuver to take advantage of the chaos. If she succeeds, your voting power becomes meaningless. Harper stared at the frost forming on the window. She scared me into a hospital bed. How am I supposed to fight that? Julian glanced at her in the rearview mirror. You don't fight it alone. There was something in his tone, steady, protective, that Harper clung to like a lifeline. When they arrived at the Mercer Tower, Julian guided her through a private entrance normally reserved for high-profile partners. Security nodded as if she had always belonged there. It felt surreal. Yesterday she was the girl abandoned at a cemetery. Today she was being escorted into a boardroom that decided the future of a multi-billion-dollar company. Inside the executive lounge, a stylist waited with a small kit. Nothing over the top, just clean, simple touches, smoothing her hair, brightening her tired eyes. Harper blinked at her reflection afterward. She didn't look like the broken woman Grant had dismissed. She looked capable, strong. Julian studied her quietly. This is who they're afraid of, he said. Her throat tightened. No one had ever said something like that to her, not even her mother directly. Douglas laid a stack of documents on the table. We're issuing an emergency shareholder notice. You'll sign as primary beneficiary. It stops Chloe from filing any hostile amendments. Stops her? Harper whispered. Or slows her down? Julian's lips curved, not quite a smile. Both. Hearing that made something spark inside Harper, something she hadn't felt in weeks. Power. Not the loud kind, not arrogance, just the quiet knowledge that she didn't have to be hunted prey anymore. But before she could sign, her phone buzzed again. She flinched instinctively. Julian reached for the device, but Harper shook her head. She had to face this herself. Another message from the unknown number. You think sitting beside him makes you safe? He'll use you too. Her pulse skipped. She looked up at Julian. His eyes were steady, unshaken. Douglas leaned forward. Harper, you need to understand. Threats escalate when the enemy starts losing. Enemy. The word no longer scared her. It clarified everything. Harper pressed the pen to the document. Her signature was clean, firm, unbroken. For the first time, she wasn't acting out of fear. She was making her first move. And Chloe Marston had no idea what was coming. The next morning, Harper walked into the Mercer Health Group tower with a resolve she didn't fully understand yet. Her steps were careful, more for the baby than herself, but every footfall echoed as if the building recognized her new authority. She carried two things with her: the emergency shareholder document she'd signed, and the weight of every threat that had pushed her to this point. But the world didn't welcome her quietly. The moment she stepped into the executive floor, whispers cut through the hallway like razors. She doesn't belong here. Margaret's kid? Isn't she some charity worker? Chloe's going to eat her alive. Harper kept walking, though her heart pounded. She wasn't prepared for what waited in the boardroom, not even close. Inside, the long mahogany table was already surrounded by executives in tailored suits, eyes sharp as glass. And at the head of the table sat Chloe Marston, blonde hair pulled into a sleek twist, crimson lips curved into a smile that never reached her eyes. She wore power the way other women wore perfume. "Well," Chloe drawled, crossing one elegant leg over the other, "the heiress arrives." Julian, standing at the far end, shot Harper a warning glance. "Stay steady." Douglas nodded to her, but tension lined his shoulders. Harper took her seat. Chloe tapped her manicured nail against her tablet. "We're here to discuss a security breach. It seems confidential documents were leaked. Very damaging documents." Her eyes flicked toward Harper, slow and deliberate. "And we need to determine who is responsible." Harper's stomach tightened. Chloe continued. "Coincidentally, the leak began the same week Ms. Ellison became a shareholder." A few board members exchanged glances. Julian's jaw flexed. "We've already confirmed the leak came from a compromised internal account." Chloe cut him off. "And yet the only new variable is sitting right here." The implication hung in the air like a trap snapping shut. Harper felt heat rising to her cheeks. "I would never leak anything. I don't even understand half of this company yet." Chloe's smile sharpened. "Exactly. Inexperience often leads to mistakes." A roar of humiliation pressed against Harper's chest, but she forced herself to breathe. "What exactly are you accusing me of?" "I'm not accusing," Chloe replied sweetly. "I'm questioning." But she wasn't. She was painting Harper as unstable, incompetent, dangerous to the company. It was a setup, elegant, vicious, and executed in front of powerful witnesses. Julian finally stepped in. "Unless Chloe has proof, this interrogation ends now." "Oh, but I do." Chloe lifted her tablet. "Emails." Harper froze. Emails with her name, her address, her supposed instructions, all forged, all designed to crush her. Gasps echoed across the room. Harper's throat tightened. "Those aren't mine. I didn't send anything." Chloe tilted her head. "Then how did your login credentials appear on every message?" A sickening silence fell. And for the first time, Harper realized. This wasn't about ruining her reputation. This was about eliminating her completely. But then Julian stepped forward, voice like steel. "Before we go further, I need the room to see something. Something Chloe didn't expect us to find." Chloe's smile faltered. Harper's heartbeat surged. This battle was far from over. The boardroom fell silent the moment Julian spoke. His tone wasn't raised, yet it sliced through Chloe's performance like a wire pulled taut. Chloe blinked, momentarily thrown off script. She recovered quickly, but not quick enough. "Julian," she said with a cool smile, "I'm unsure what theatrics you're attempting, but—" This isn't theatrics, Julian interrupted, stepping toward the center of the room. It's clarity. He tapped the tablet in his hand. The screen lit up, casting a cold glow across his face. As of 2 hours ago, he continued, our cybersecurity team traced the forged emails back to the original IP address. His gaze swept the room before landing directly on Chloe. Not Harper's. Not an external hacker. Chloe's fingers tightened around her pen. What exactly are you implying? Julian didn't flinch. That the leak came from a device registered under your name. A wave of murmurs rippled through the board members. Chloe let out a sharp laugh. That's absurd. Anyone could have used... Douglas stepped forward, placing a printed report onto the table. The device was logged into your personal Wi-Fi network, Miss Marston, and the login occurred during hours you were present in your penthouse. Chloe's smile wavered. But, she sputtered, that doesn't prove I... Julian cut her off again, this time with unforgiving precision. You also authorized a wire transfer to a burner account connected to Grant Ellison. Harper felt her stomach drop. Grant, her husband, no, ex-husband, had been receiving money from Chloe. Gasps echoed again. Some board members leaned back as if distancing themselves from a ticking bomb. Chloe's mask cracked. You have no idea what you're talking about. Douglas opened another document. The wire transfer memo included an annotation. Deliver pressure, remove obstacle. That obstacle, Miss Marston, was Harper. A stunned silence fell. Harper felt her pulse in her ears. For days, she'd been terrified, unsure who was attacking her. Now the truth lay bare before an entire boardroom. The woman who had nearly cost her her child, her sanity, her safety, sat only a few feet away, and she was cornered. Chloe's composure snapped like glass under heat. Do you think anyone here cares about that naive little girl? She pointed at Harper, her voice rising. She doesn't belong at this table. She doesn't belong in this company. Her mother shielded her because she knew Harper wasn't capable. Enough, Julian said, voice like a closing vault door. Harper raised her chin. Her hands shook, but her voice didn't. You terrified me. You threatened me while I was pregnant. You put my baby at risk. Chloe's eyes burned with something feral. You were never meant to keep those shares. Julian turned to the board. In light of the evidence, I move for an immediate vote to remove Chloe Marston from the executive committee and suspend her pending legal investigation. Hands went up across the table, fast, decisive, almost relieved. Chloe's breath hitched. You can't do this. No, Julian corrected. You did this. Security was called. As Chloe was escorted out, her glare stayed locked on Harper, poisonous and trembling. You'll regret this, she hissed. Harper didn't look away. For the first time, she said quietly, I don't think I will. The news spread faster than wildfire. By the next morning, every executive floor, every whispered hallway conversation, every private Slack channel inside Mercer Health Group carried the same headline. Chloe Marston removed. Fraud probe underway. Harper didn't need to see the articles. She could feel the shift the moment she entered the building. People didn't glare anymore. They stared. Some with curiosity, some with admiration, some with fear, but none with the casual cruelty they had shown her before. She wasn't invisible. She wasn't prey. She was a threat. But the world never lets a woman rise without testing her all over again. That afternoon, as Harper stepped outside to catch a breath of cold air, doctor's orders to keep her stress down, she heard someone call her name. Harper? Her spine stiffened. She knew that voice. Grant. He stood on the sidewalk in a designer coat she'd never seen before, hair perfectly styled, the same charming smile he used when he wanted the world to think he was a decent man. But today, the charm didn't reach his eyes. Those eyes were calculating. I've been trying to reach you, he said, stepping closer. Harper instinctively put a hand over her stomach. Stay where you are. Grant exhaled dramatically, as if she were the unreasonable one. Come on, Harp. Don't be like that. I heard about your situation. I wanted to check on you. You mean the situation you helped create? She shot back. His jaw tightened for a second, then smoothed. You misunderstood. Chloe told me she was helping us, helping me secure our future. I didn't know she was threatening you. You have to believe me. Believe you? Harper echoed, stunned by his audacity. You divorced me at my mother's burial. Grant's face twitched. I made a mistake. A stupid mistake. But now that everything's out, we can work together. I can help you navigate the company. We can be a family again. I want to be there for the baby. There it was, the real reason. Not love, not remorse, opportunity. Harper felt something inside her settle, a quiet certainty she didn't expect. You think I'm still the woman you left standing alone at the graveside? She said softly. But she's gone. You buried her long before you handed me those divorce papers. Grant stepped closer, desperation leaking through his polished exterior. Harper, don't do this. You need me. You don't know how to handle... A new voice cut in, low and unmistakably protective. She doesn't need you. Both turned. Julian stood there, expression unreadable but his presence unmistakably commanding. Grant scoffed. And you do? She's just a... Julian stepped in front of Harper. Finish that sentence and see how fast your attorney calls back. Grant's face flushed red. You think you can replace me? Harper stepped around Julian, her voice steady. You replaced yourself the moment you walked away. Grant's eyes darkened, but he said nothing as she turned and walked back inside the building. For the first time, he couldn't follow her. For the first time, Harper left him standing in the cold. The encounter with Grant should have left Harper shaken, but instead, it clarified everything. For the first time since the funeral, she felt something close to solid ground beneath her feet. She wasn't fighting to survive anymore. She was fighting to protect what her mother had entrusted to her, and the world had no intention of making that easy. The next morning, Harper arrived at Mercer Health Group to find the lobby buzzing with energy. Too much energy. Reporters hovered just outside the revolving doors, cameras aimed like weapons. Security was trying to push them back, but they kept shouting the same question. Harper, is it true you're under investigation? Are you being removed from the board? Did you commit fraud to obtain your mother's shares? Her heart stumbled. Fraud? Investigation? What had Chloe done now? Julian was already waiting for her upstairs, tension sharp across his shoulders. Don't look at the news, he said immediately. I've already seen enough, Harper whispered. They're saying I'm under investigation. Julian exchanged a grim look with Douglas, who had just arrived. Someone leaked an anonymous tip to 3 financial outlets last night. They claim you manipulated documents to claim your inheritance. That's impossible, Harper said, her voice cracking. Everything is legal. My mother... We know, Douglas said firmly. But rumors move faster than truth. And Chloe still has allies. People who don't care if the allegations are false as long as they damage you. Harper felt her throat tighten. So what happens now? Another board meeting to humiliate me? Worse. Douglas exhaled heavily. Harper, the state attorney's office called this morning. They want you to come in for questioning. Her blood went cold. Questioning? About what? About the possibility that the trust documents were altered, Douglas said. It's nonsense. But if you refuse to come in, it looks like guilt. Harper pressed a hand to her stomach. The baby shifted under her palm as if sensing danger again. I can't go through another attack. I'm exhausted. My body can't take... Julian stepped closer, lowering his voice. You won't go alone. I'll be there. Douglas will be there, and we'll shut this down before it spirals. Something in his tone, steady, protective, kept her from falling apart. But fate wasn't finished. Before they could leave the office, Julian's assistant rushed in with panic in her eyes. "You need to see this," she said, handing Julian a tablet. He turned the screen toward Harper. A video was playing, a video of Harper leaving the hospital, looking weak, frightened, barely able to walk. The caption read, "Mercer heiress fakes medical emergency as fraud probe closes in." Her knees buckled. Julian caught her before she fell. "They're trying to break me," Harper whispered. "They want the world to hate me." Julian held her upright. "They underestimate you, Harper. That's their mistake." She lifted her head, eyes burning. Not with fear now, but something far more dangerous. "They want a war?" she murmured. "Fine." Her fingers curled, steady despite the shaking in her chest. "I'll give them one." The attorney's office was colder than Harper expected. Sleek gray walls, glass partitions, and a conference table that looked like no one had ever dared to spill a cup of coffee on it. She sat between Julian and Douglas, her fingers knotted together in her lap. The fluorescent lights hummed faintly overhead, threatening to split her headache open. A door clicked. 2 investigators entered, not hostile, not warm, professionally unreadable. "Ms. Ellison," the lead investigator said, settling across from her. "Thank you for coming. We just have a few questions regarding your mother's trust documents." Harper swallowed. "Of course." They began with simple things, dates, signatures, her relationship with her mother, but slowly the questions sharpened. "Were you aware your mother held significant shares in Mercer Health Group?" "No." "Did you ever discuss altering paperwork?" "Never." "Did anyone pressure you to claim the trust prematurely?" "No." But then came the question that chilled her to her core. "Miss Ellison, did you ever feel your marriage was ending because of financial motivations?" Harper froze. Her pulse rang in her ears. Julian tensed beside her. "What does that have to do with this?" Harper whispered. The investigator exchanged a glance with his partner. "We received an anonymous statement suggesting your ex-husband believed he was entitled to part of the inheritance." Julian's hand curled into a fist. Harper's voice trembled, but not with fear anymore. Anger simmered beneath it. "Grant didn't even know about the inheritance." "That's not what the statement suggests." The investigator slid a printed email across the table. This came from the same anonymous source who reported the alleged fraud. Harper lifted the page with shaking fingers. The email claimed, Grant expected Harper to inherit her mother's assets. Grant accused Harper of forging documents. Harper threatened to leave him with nothing. Grant feared for his reputation if she exposed him. Every line was a lie, but the signature at the bottom wasn't. Anonymous contributor, SM. SM. Her skin turned cold. Sienna Marston, Chloe's younger sister, the woman Grant had been seeing behind Harper's back. A slow, horrifying picture formed. Chloe was the strategist. Sienna was the messenger. Grant was the weapon. All three, tied together like threads of the same venomous web. Douglas leaned forward. "These women have a history of coordinated manipulation. The Marstons have tried to stage hostile takeovers before." The investigator nodded. "We're aware, which is why we're inclined to believe you, Ms. Ellison, but we need to solidify the case." "Solidify?" Harper repeated. "How?" "We need proof the allegations were fabricated," he said, "something that ties Sienna or Chloe directly to the forged documents." Harper closed her eyes, her pulse racing. Proof. She needed proof. Then, a memory flashed. Grant's MacBook. The day she left the apartment. The open tabs, the message notification from Sienna, a digital trail, one she hadn't copied, one she'd been too heartbroken to capture. But maybe not erased. She opened her eyes. "I think I know where to find that proof," Harper whispered. Julian turned toward her, recognition sparking in his gaze. "This is your chance," he said softly. "The moment you turn their weapon back on them." Harper inhaled slowly, her resolve solidifying like steel. "They wanted a war," she said. "Now it's my turn." The moment Harper stepped out of the attorney's office, the icy Manhattan air slapped her awake. She no longer felt like a victim stumbling through chaos. She felt like someone walking toward a truth sharp enough to cut. Julian stayed close beside her, matching her pace, though she hadn't asked him to. Douglas followed with his leather briefcase clutched tightly, already anticipating the coming battle. "We're going back to the apartment," Harper said, determination filling her voice. "Grant's laptop, his cloud backups. There has to be something left." Julian nodded. "If Sienna contacted him from her own device, even once, there might be metadata, timestamps, logs." Douglas added, "And if they were sloppy, which arrogance often breeds, we might find direct evidence linking Chloe's scheme to Grant's involvement." A small, fierce hope ignited in Harper's chest. Not the fragile hope she'd felt weeks ago. This one burned hotter, cleaner. When they reached Brooklyn, Harper paused at the base of the apartment stairs. Memories crashed into her. The chipped banister Grant never fixed. The door they argued behind. The hallway where she once waited for him to come home from late meetings. She felt her breath falter, but Julian gently touched her elbow. "You don't have to be afraid of this place anymore," he murmured. Harper straightened. "I'm not." Inside, the apartment looked exactly as she'd left it, like a life interrupted mid-sentence. Grant hadn't returned, or maybe he was too afraid to. Either way, good. The MacBook sat where she remembered, on the dining table, lid closed, collecting dust like discarded evidence. Harper's heart hammered as she opened it. The login screen appeared. "Password," she whispered. "He always used the same pattern. Something arrogant." Douglas raised a brow. "His name?" "No." She typed, "Ellison-esque." The laptop unlocked instantly. Julian huffed. "Predictable." Harper navigated to his email, her fingers trembling slightly. Deleted messages. She opened the trash folder. A flood of emails appeared. Her heart stuttered. Messages from Sienna Marston. Dozens. Some flagged, some archived, some unsent drafts. She clicked one. "You need to push her harder. Chloe says she's close to folding." Julian leaned over her shoulder, eyes narrowing. "Keep going." Harper opened another. "Once the documents leak, she'll crumble. Make sure she signs the divorce before the announcement." Her stomach twisted. Another email. "Chloe wired the money. We'll celebrate once it's over." Douglas's breath caught. "This is enough to drown them." But Harper shook her head. "Not yet. We need something that ties everything together." Then she saw it. A folder labeled Backup Sync. She clicked. Inside were screenshots. Screenshots of messages between Chloe and Grant. Screenshots of forged documents. Screenshots of threats, drafts, scripts, notes. And then the one that broke the case wide open. A recorded voicemail, time-stamped, sent from Sienna. Harper pressed play. Sienna's voice filled the room, cold and unmistakable. "Once she breaks Grant, you and I get everything. Chloe will handle the rest. Just keep pretending you care." Julian's jaw tightened. Douglas closed his eyes in disbelief. Harper stared at the screen, tears burning, but not from sorrow, from vindication. "This," she whispered, "is the proof." No one in that conspiracy would walk away from this. Not Chloe, not Sienna, not Grant. She finally exhaled, steady and sure. "They tried to bury me," she said, "but they forgot one thing." Julian answered softly, admiration threading through his voice. "That you know how to rise." The next 48 hours moved with the pulse of a storm. Douglas prepared legal briefs, Julian coordinated with internal security, and Harper, still exhausted, still carrying the weight of her pregnancy, reviewed every piece of evidence they pulled from Grant's laptop. Her mother's scarf rested over her shoulders like armor, the lavender scent reminding her she wasn't fighting alone. When Monday arrived, Mercer Health Group called for an emergency full-board assembly, mandatory attendance, no excuses, which meant Chloe and Sienna Marston, as well as Grant Ellison, had been served notices they couldn't ignore. The timing was perfect. The trap was set, and Harper walked in knowing she held the detonator. The boardroom was packed, executives, legal teams, analysts, even a handful of reporters invited under the guise of corporate transparency. Chloe sat at the table stiffly, her expression stretched thin, while Sienna lounged beside her like she owned the room. Grant, however, looked jittery, eyes darting toward Harper before sliding away in shame. Julian stood at Harper's side as she entered. Conversations halted. Every head turned. For the first time, not a single whisper followed her, only silence laced with anticipation. The chairperson cleared his throat. "We are here today to address allegations, counter-allegations, and the integrity of this corporation. Ms. Ellison, Mr. Mercer, your team requested the floor." Julian nodded once. "We'll begin with evidence." Douglas dimmed the lights and projected the first screenshot. Sienna's email to Grant. Cruel, manipulative, explicit. A murmur rippled across the board. Next came the money transfer records, Chloe's personal account wiring funds to Grant, annotated, "Deliver pressure." Chloe stiffened. "This is taken out of context." Then the forged emails appeared on screen, metadata showing they originated from Chloe's penthouse network, and finally, the nail, the coffin, the match that would burn their entire scheme to ash. Douglas played the recorded voicemail. Sienna's voice filled the room. "Once she breaks, Grant, you and I get everything. Chloe will handle the rest. Just keep pretending you care." The room exploded. Gasps, curses, outrage. Executives recoiled, reporters scribbled furiously, even the chairperson paled. Grant slumped back in his chair, color draining from his face. Sienna's smirk vanished. Chloe's jaw clenched so tightly a muscle twitched near her ear. "This is doctored," she barked. "This is—" Julian stepped forward, his voice calm but slicing. "Our cybersecurity team verified every timestamp, every IP address, every login credential. These actions weren't only unethical, they were criminal." He looked directly at Harper then, his voice steady. "You tried to break a pregnant woman to seize her inheritance. You tried to convince the world she was a fraud. And you underestimated her." The chairperson slammed his gavel. "Effective immediately, Chloe Marston and Sienna Marston are removed from all corporate roles pending criminal proceedings." Grant swallowed hard, voice trembling. "Harper, please." Harper finally spoke, her voice soft, but carrying through the room like a blade through silk. "You chose them over me. You chose their lies over our family, and now you get to choose your consequences alone." Chloe stood abruptly as security approached. "This isn't over," she hissed. Harper met her glare evenly. "It is for you." As the Marstons were escorted out and the room erupted into chatter, Harper felt something she hadn't felt since her mother died. Justice, and the beginning of her rise. The fallout hit Grant harder than anyone expected. Within 24 hours of the board meeting, his name was trending on legal forums, corporate gossip circles, and even a few mainstream financial pages. Disgraced attorney linked to corporate sabotage. Ex-husband involved in conspiracy against Mercer heiress. Headlines he once sneered at now branded him like scars. Harper didn't celebrate. She didn't gloat. She simply breathed, deeply, steadily, for the first time in months. But karma wasn't finished with Grant. 3 days later, his law firm announced a formal suspension pending investigation. Grant tried to spin it as temporary, insisting to anyone who'd listen that it was all a misunderstanding, that he was the real victim. But strategy only works when people still believe you. and after the voicemail leak, no one did. Still, he refused to disappear quietly. Late one afternoon, Harper left a meeting at Mercer HQ feeling drained but proud. She had just signed off on a new maternal wellness initiative the company would fund in her mother's honor. Her baby kicked softly as if approving. She stepped out into the crisp air, planning to go home, when Grant appeared from behind a column. "Harper, please, just hear me out." His voice cracked, not with sorrow, with fear. She stopped, keeping her distance. "Grant, you shouldn't be here." "I don't know what they told you," he said, stepping forward, "but I never meant to hurt you. Chloe tricked me. Sienna tricked me. You took their money," Harper said quietly. Grant winced. "It wasn't like that." "You helped them terrorize me." He looked away. "I didn't know they'd go that far." "You read the messages, Grant. You know exactly what you agreed to." A muscle in his jaw twitched. "I was trying to secure something for us. For the baby." "You left us," Harper whispered. "At a cemetery." He flinched like she'd hit him. For a moment, just a moment, she saw the boy he used to be. Ambitious, insecure, hungry to impress people who never cared about him. But choices shape men, and Grant had carved himself into someone she no longer recognized. Julian stepped out of the building behind her, stopping protectively at her side. Grant's expression twisted at the sight of him. "Oh, I get it now," Grant snarled. "This was your plan. Trade up, upgrade. That's what this is, right?" Julian didn't react. "Walk away, Grant." "This isn't your business," Grant snapped. "It became my business the moment you endangered her and her child." Grant turned back to Harper, desperation clawing at him. "Please, I'm begging you. Tell them I wasn't involved. Tell them I didn't know." "I'll lose everything." "You already lost everything," Harper said softly, "when you stopped being the man I married." He stared at her, breath shaking, before the truth finally settled across his face. There was no coming back. Security approached. Grant backed away slowly, his voice small now. "Harper, please." But she didn't answer. Julian placed a hand at her back, guiding her gently toward the car waiting at the curb. As she leaned into him for balance, she realized something with startling clarity. Grant's chapter was over. Hers was only beginning. The invitation arrived embossed in gold, delivered by courier to Harper's apartment with a handwritten note from the Mercer board. "Your mother supported this gala for years. We hope you'll attend in her honor." The annual Healthcare Visionaries Gala, held at the Plaza Hotel, dripping in chandeliers, marble floors, and Manhattan's wealthiest decision-makers. It was the kind of event Harper had only seen in movies, never imagined stepping foot inside. But tonight, she wasn't attending as a guest. She was attending as the woman who had survived a corporate war and won. Still, as Fiona helped her adjust the soft ivory gown around her 7-month belly, Harper's heart hammered. "I don't belong in rooms like that," she murmured. Fiona placed a hand on her shoulder. "Harper, those rooms were built to keep women like you out. Walking in is the rebellion." The words settled into her bones. When she arrived at the plaza, camera flashes burst like fireworks, not aggressive, curious, admiring. Hungry for the story of the woman whose takedown of the Marston sisters had leaked into the press in carefully diplomatic fragments. Julian waited for her at the entrance in a tailored black tux, looking like every inch the CEO whose approval could tilt stock prices. But when he saw Harper, something softened across his features, something private, unguarded. "You look," he paused, then finished simply, "unstoppable." Her breath caught, not because she needed his praise, but because he meant it. Inside, the ballroom glowed with golden light. A string quartet played near the staircase. Servers in white gloves carried trays of crystal flutes. And everywhere, eyes followed Harper, not with disdain this time, but with recognition. She moved through the room on Julian's arm, hearing whispers. That's her. The Ellison heiress. She took down Chloe Marston herself. Harper kept her posture steady, remembering her mother's words. Some storms come to reveal what was hidden. Halfway through the evening, the chairperson of the board approached the podium. Tonight, he announced, we honor a woman whose courage and integrity reflect the values our industry desperately needs. Harper's stomach tightened. Harper Ellison, he continued, would you join us on stage? Applause rippled through the ballroom, genuine, warm, rising in waves. Julian leaned toward her. You deserve this. She stepped onto the stage, the lights bathing her in a soft glow. Her palms trembled, but her voice did not. My mother spent her life caring for others, Harper began. She believed healthcare wasn't about power, but humanity. Tonight, I stand here because she taught me that even in the darkest moments, we fight for the light. The room fell silent, captivated. Then, from the back, a commotion, a voice rising above the crowd. Grant, disheveled, uninvited. Security rushed toward him, but he shouted desperately, Harper, please, just listen, please. The entire ballroom turned. Harper's heart didn't race, didn't break, didn't even tremble. She simply looked at him the way a rising sun looks at a fading shadow, aware but unmoved. Because tonight, the city finally knew who she was, and Grant no longer mattered. Gasps swept across the ballroom like a sudden gust of wind. The lights, the music, the glittering chandeliers, all froze around the spectacle at the back of the room. Grant, pale and unsteady, pushed against security as they moved toward him. Harper, he shouted again, voice cracking. Please, just give me 1 minute. Julian shifted, stepping instinctively closer to her, but Harper lifted a hand. Not to Grant, to steady herself, to stay in control. I'll handle this, she whispered, and Julian nodded, though his jaw tightened with protective restraint. Harper stepped off the stage, heels clicking softly against the marble floor. Her gown swept behind her like a pale ribbon of resolve as the crowd parted, whispering, watching the confrontation unfold like a scene out of a film they couldn't look away from. Grant froze when she reached him. His chest rose and fell with panicked breaths. Gone was the polished attorney. He looked smaller, sunken, haunted. Harper... His eyes glistened, whether from shame or desperation, she refused to guess. I lost everything. Chloe, Sienna, their lawyers are coming after me. I don't have a job. Nobody will take my calls. I need your help. Harper inhaled slowly. The scent of roses from the floral arrangements, the music fading in the background, the weight of every eye in the ballroom, everything sharpened into clarity. You needed my help? She repeated softly. Or you needed my inheritance? Grant flinched. No, I was confused. I made mistakes. But I loved you, Harper. I always did. A murmur rose among the guests. Even the string quartet had paused mid-song. Julian watched from a distance, posture rigid, ready to intervene at the smallest sign she needed him. Harper's voice lowered to a whisper, but the microphone on stage picked it up, broadcasting her words across the ballroom. You left me at my mother's burial, Grant. You looked at me, pregnant, grieving, and handed me divorce papers. Grant swallowed. I wasn't thinking clearly. No, Harper said, stronger now. You were thinking perfectly clearly. You chose ambition over kindness, greed over loyalty. You believed I was small enough to abandon without consequence. His lips trembled. Harper, I'm begging you. Please don't let them ruin me. I can't survive this alone. Her eyes softened, not with pity, but with something deeper. Understanding. Closure. You survived just fine without me. she said. Now you can survive without the woman you tried to destroy. Grant's expression crumpled. Harper lifted her chin. Security, please escort Mr. Ellison out. Two guards stepped forward. Grant panicked. Harper, wait! Harper! His voice broke into a desperate cry as they pulled him toward the exit. Please! But she didn't answer. Didn't chase after him. Didn't look back. She walked away, slowly, gracefully, like a woman who had finally reclaimed every piece of herself. As she stepped back toward the stage, applause began. Hesitant at first, then swelling, filling the ballroom with thunderous approval. Julian met her halfway, his voice low and sure. You did more than stand your ground tonight, he said. You proved you never needed him to rise. Harper exhaled, feeling the weight lift from her chest. For the first time, her truth had spoken louder than his lies. The gala didn't return to normal after Grant's removal. It transformed. Conversations softened, music resumed, and the golden lights of the plaza warmed the room once more. But the atmosphere carried a new electricity. People weren't looking at Harper with curiosity anymore. They were looking with respect. Some approached her cautiously, offering condolences for her ordeal. Others congratulated her for her strength. But Harper barely processed any of it. Her heartbeat was still steadying, her breath slowly returning to her chest. Julian stayed close, not hovering, not controlling, simply present. A quiet presence, the kind that felt like a shelter after months of storms. You handled that with more grace than anyone could have imagined, he said quietly. Harper let out a slow exhale. I didn't feel graceful. You didn't need to feel it to be it. His words landed gently, settling into the space between them. She turned toward him, noticing something she hadn't allowed herself to see before. The softness in his gaze, the way he looked at her not as an heiress or a shareholder, but as a woman he genuinely respected. Before she could respond, the chairperson returned to the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, before we continue, we'd like to honor the contributions of Margaret Ellison by announcing the formation of a new healthcare initiative, the Ellison Foundation for Women's Wellness, led by her daughter Harper. Applause rose again, stronger, more heartfelt. Julian leaned closer. This is yours, Harper, not because of what you inherited, but because of who you are. Her throat tightened. I never expected any of this. That's the thing about life, Julian said. Sometimes the people who try to break us end up revealing what we were meant for. She looked up at him, surprised by the quiet wisdom in his voice. You really believe that? I've watched you fight battles most people wouldn't survive, and you did it with compassion, with dignity. That kind of strength. His voice lowered slightly. It changes people. Harper felt warmth bloom in her chest, unexpected, unfamiliar, but deeply comforting. A server passed with champagne flutes. Julian took one and lifted it toward her, then paused. Sparkling cider? He asked gently. She nodded with a small smile. He handed her a crystal flute filled with golden bubbles. To your mother, he said, raising his glass. Harper lifted hers. To new beginnings. Their glasses touched with a soft chime. For a moment, the room blurred around them, the chandeliers, the murmuring guests, the music drifting through the air. All Harper could see was the man standing before her, steady, kind, unshaken by her past or her scars, a man who had fought beside her when she had nothing left to give. You know, Julian said softly, tonight wasn't just a victory, it was a turning point. Harper tilted her head. A turning point for what? For you, he answered, for whatever your life becomes next. She held his gaze, and for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to wonder. Could happiness be waiting for her on the other side of survival? The thought didn't scare her. It felt possible. Spring arrived in New York with a gentleness Harper hadn't felt in years. The city that once overwhelmed her now felt like a place she could finally breathe in. Slowly, deeply, fully. Cherry blossoms lined the paths near Central Park, petals drifting like soft confetti each time the wind whispered through them. Harper stood beneath one of the blooming trees, her son cradled in her arms, his tiny fingers curled around the edge of her sweater, his breath warm against her collarbone. The world had tried to break her before he ever took his first breath, but he had survived with her. Through fear, through betrayal, through nights when she wasn't sure either of them would make it out whole. She kissed the top of his head. "We made it," she whispered. Footsteps approached behind her. She didn't need to turn to know who they belonged to. Julian. He stopped beside her, hands in his coat pockets, looking at her son with a softened gaze she once believed he only reserved for boardrooms and million-dollar plans. "He looks like you," Julian murmured. Harper smiled. "Poor kid." Julian laughed under his breath. "If he grows up with even half your courage, he'll be unstoppable." She shifted her son slightly, her heart swelling. Courage. A word she'd never used for herself until recently. A word her mother had always believed belonged to her. They walked together toward a small garden tucked behind a wrought iron gate, a hidden corner of the city Margaret Ellison had loved. In the center stood a plaque, newly installed, the Ellison Foundation for Women's Wellness in honor of Margaret Ellison, a legacy of strength, care, and hope. Harper traced her mother's name with trembling fingers. "I wish she could have seen this." Julian stepped closer. "She did," he said quietly. "Every decision she made was for this moment. For you." Harper blinked away tears. The good kind. The healing kind. After a long silence, Julian cleared his throat, nervous in a way she had never seen. "Harper, there's something I've wanted to say for a while." She turned, surprised. Julian Mercer was never nervous. He continued softly, "You've spent so long fighting battles you never asked for, but now you get to choose what comes next. And if you ever wanted—" His gaze dropped for a moment before rising again, steady, sincere. "If you ever wanted a partner, not to rescue you, not to define you, but to walk beside you, I would be honored to be that man." Her breath caught, not because she hadn't felt something growing between them, but because the offer was gentle, not rushed, not pressured, simply true. "Julian," she whispered, "I never thought I'd have room in my life for anything more than survival." "You have space now," he said, "and a future." A breeze swept through the garden, scattering petals around them like blessings. Harper looked at her son, then at Julian, then at the plaque with her mother's name, and for the first time there was no fear in her chest. Only clarity. "I think," she said softly, "I'm ready to choose happiness." Julian smiled, the rare, unguarded smile she'd come to cherish, and took her free hand gently, not claiming, not leading, just there. As they stood together beneath the blooming trees, Harper realized her mother had been right all along. Some storms don't destroy. They uncover who you were always meant to be, and Harper Ellison was finally stepping into that woman. So, our story has finally come to an end. And if you're still here with me at this very moment, maybe somewhere along Harper's journey, something touched your heart in its own quiet, personal way. You see, life often throws storms at us without warning. Betrayal, abandonment, misunderstandings. But as the Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Harper didn't choose her pain, but she did choose to rise from it. And that's the lesson for all of us. We can't control what others do to us, but we always have the power to choose how we rise afterward. Life doesn't ask us to be strong all at once. It only asks us to be a little stronger than we were yesterday. To believe, even just a little, that we deserve a kinder, calmer, happier life. If this story made you reflect, if you saw a piece of yourself in Harper's path, then please like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the healing journeys still to come. We're still here, telling stories, walking beside you, and reminding you that you were never alone.